Welcome, everyone. My name is Tiffany Anderson, and I'm the president of the Sunnyvale Historical Society and over the museum and the park. I am so excited to see each of you tonight. We are really privileged to have these two gentlemen behind me to tell us a little bit more about the history of Fremont High School. So 10 years ago, I started as a volleyball coach at Fremont High School and coached there for 2 seasons and then moved on to other things. But it's a very special place. And whenever I have folks visit, I say immediately, we need to go see Fremont High School. It is the most beautiful high school in the valley with a grand history that we'll find out more about tonight. Raise of hands, how many of you are graduates of Fremont High School? Okay. So we didn't realize, was this like the alumni gathering, you know, for the class of, you know, I don't know what, 19-something to 1977 to other years. Okay. Okay, so let's, oh my goodness. Okay, so raise of hands if you have children who went to Fremont High School. All right, so we have your sponsors here. So a reminder, we have some fundraisers coming up for the museum. We have our winter tea coming up on December 7, 8, and 14, 15, and that's a lovely event that happens here in this room. We also have a children's exhibit going on. It's a Lego exhibit that's just over there. It's darkened right now, but on Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, if you have grandchildren, children who would like to come see Legos and you need to get out of the house, that's there. There's memberships to this museum. There's other ways to give, and I'm happy to share with you later. But let's go ahead and turn it on to our speakers, and I'm going to start with Wes over here from Cupertino High.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for coming out, everybody. My name is Wes Morris. I've been a Cupertino High School teacher for 30 years, and this is a little bit of a rough room for me, I know. But I have a soft spot for Fremont. I married into a family that that had a lot of Fremont grads. I had several cousins go to Fremont, and I played my best basketball games in your gym. So I will always remember Fremont very fondly. I am here tonight to support one of my very good friends, Andy, and in his project, The History of Fremont High School. And I'm going to be asking him some questions tonight to kind of talk about the process and what he learned and those kinds of things. I first met Andy, I think it was 1998. We were assigned adjoining rooms. He was a first-year teacher. I was maybe a couple more years in at that point. He was teaching, I think, mostly world history. I was teaching U.S. history, but we had an adjoining door, and it didn't take us very long to find out that we had very similar experiences growing up. He was South Sunnyvale. I was North Cupertino. We both graduated from he graduated from Fremont, the school he wrote a book about. I graduated from Cupertino, and I've done a little history work with some books with Cupertino, from Little League to pro sports to pop culture and some of the movies of the 1980s. We go back a long way. So I'll give Andy a moment to kind of introduce himself and a little bit of the project, and then we'll get right into some questions.
All right, good evening, everybody. It's great to see so many faces that I know and faces that I don't know, and I am just so fortunate that everyone came to hear Wes and I have a conversation about something in some place that's very important to me. So if you don't know me, my name is Andy Walzak. I grew up, as Wes said, out in South Sunnyvale in Cormorant Court, right next to Ortega Park, and it was just an amazing childhood growing up there. Ended up going to Fremont High School, talk a little bit about that in the Q&A, graduated in 1992. I've worked in the Fremont Union High School District for 28 years now, mostly at this point as a school administrator, primarily at Cupertino High School, and then now these last 5 years at Fremont. I also taught, like Wes said, next door to him at Cupertino, and I taught and coached football at Fremont, and I see a couple of families where I had their children in my class. I was very fortunate to have them. So in the teaching business, we talk about framing a lesson. I evaluate teachers, and we talk about framing a lesson. So the one thing I want to do just in order to frame the conversation that Wes and I have, so there's kind of a visual to what the school is like, what the kids look like, what the campus look like, and how it connects to this amazing Sunnyvale and Cupertino community these last 100 years. I'm going to show just, if you were at the 100th celebration in May, you saw the second half of this. The very first half I did alumni talking about their name and what year they graduated, but for our purposes here, just to give a little brief history of the school and also what everybody looks like and what the campus looks like, I'm just going to show that part. So I'm going to show a quick video and then we'll get into our conversation. think they gave you a little retrospective of what the school was like over these last 100 or so years. That was one of our leadership students, Maddie Nguyen, who is a UC Davis student, the Harvard of the West, they say, who put that together. I think she pulled an all-nighter. I said, Maddie, will you do this for me? Is it done yet? The event's on Saturday. And then she came and says, it's done at 6:30 a.m. day of the event. So she's a lot smarter human being, let's just say that too. So, all right, Mr. Morse, good to see you, my friend.
All right.
Oh, wait, hold on one sec.
Oh.
Could you hear the music? All right, for a Fremont You Know sticker, what movie is that music from? I know one man in this room who's going to know it. Who knows? Bobby Jezik, I'm disappointed, my friend. It's not Henningsen, sorry. Football movie. Rudy, who said Rudy? All right, well, you guys are Homestead grads, so I don't know if I can give you a Fremont You Know sticker. All right. I love you guys, but all right. All right, sorry, go ahead.
All right, Andy, I suppose we should maybe start with how long it took you to do all of this work, and then why did you want to do it?
I'll answer the first thing first, so just why. I think that's pretty, I mean, there's personal and sentimental and historical reasons. Growing up, just love history. My dad's right here. I grew up reading history books, loving sports biographies, loving, record books, the baseball encyclopedia. I loved all of those different things. So just history was always something that was very important to me. It was always a subject that came easily to me in school. I had awesome teachers. Mr. Miller at Fremont was a great history teacher, inspired me to want to be a teacher. So really the historical piece of it was really a big part of it. And then the Fremont part, going to Fremont was a very transformative part of my life. I was lucky to go there with some of my very best friends. We had a great experience there. I think most of you know, since Sunnyvale closed in 1981, Fremont's reputation kind of up and down. We all went and had a fantastic experience, and just being able to meet all these different people from different parts of the world who are a lot different than me was really important part of who I became later as an adult. And I didn't realize what a fantastic experience I had until I got to college and was sitting in dorm rooms. And I don't know if there's any Fremont grads post-1981 that had the same experience, where you're just kind of listening to people and going, where in the world did they go to this school? Because they did not have the same experience that I did. And I felt very fortunate. I think a lot of my the way I look at the world comes from my time at Fremont. And I really got interested in Fremont history when I was a senior in high school. In fact, I brought some props here. When we played basketball, I was on the basketball team. Mr. Henningsen and Mr. Montgomery were actually players on the basketball team. Mr. Kelly, Fremont legend, our coach, would do these season books. And I think Wes knows from the Cupertino coaches that stats and history and we didn't have, and I was a football, baseball guy. We didn't have anything like that for football. And I'm like, gosh, it'd be fun to do that. So my best friend Greg and I went to the libraries, and we came up with sort of this rudimentary Fremont record book in that spring of 1992. And we did an article, kind of a two-spread thing in the Chief about the history of Fremont High School in 1992. And very proud of the work. It took a lot of time. We were interviewing people, called Coach Ferguson out of the blue. These annoying teenagers were calling him in his retirement. So, but it was a really fun experience. The Fremont part of it was important to me. And just the other aspect, I really enjoyed high school, and it was fun. My parents, who I dedicate the book to, I talk a lot about, I think what I did in high school and how I got involved in high school had a lot to do with them. They were both very active in activities, in athletics, and student government. My mom was the homecoming queen. My dad was his class president and involved in theater. My mom was the salutatorian in her class. And they also, spent a lot of time keeping up with their friends. So they were very good role models in terms of having a really good high school experience. So with all that said, I loved Fremont. And then I meet this guy at Cupertino High School, and he's he did some Cupertino basketball stuff like I did Fremont football, and at some point in time, I don't know when, but he said, I'm going to write a book on Cupertino High School, and Cupertino is 40 years younger than Fremont, so I'm like, always in the back of my mind to do something with Fremont. It just was a daunting task. So Wes's second version of the Cupertino book looks like this and is a fantastic book, very entertaining, super informative, and certainly a model of what I wanted to do. And so Wes really was also an inspiration. Anybody asked me why I did it, I said, I pull this out of my my bookcase in my office and say, this had a lot to do why I wanted to do it because of Wes. And it took a really just, I'm just going to do this. I knew it would take a long time. That was the big thing. I know it's going to take a long time. However long it takes, I'm going to do it. And so it did. It took 8 to 10 years. So I think that was the how long did it take question was.
And you got it
yeah.
just in time?
Yes, I think I started, if I look at kind of, I think it was like 2015, I started. And I think we got it off to Mr. DeHart in July, June-ish, something like that. Yes. Yeah.
In kind of helping you put the book together, you wrote all of it over that time. One of the things that I was really interested in was the inclusion of a local history. Not just Fremont High School 100, not just the history of Fremont High School, but the inclusion of a local history. I was wondering if you could maybe share a little bit of your thinking on that.
Yes, because, I mean, your book is Cupertino High School. I mean, Cupertino was the third school, so it was really a lot about how that school developed, the school culture, the athletics, the activities, how the teaching staff and the students. But with Fremont is so much different because it was obviously, it came out of nothing, right? There was, this community had no secondary school. The Cupertino and Sunnyvale school districts sort of formed right before the turn of the century, I believe, right in the early 1900s. And there was no high school in this area. And so it's really hard to include information just about Fremont when it really involved this whole entire area. We call it the West Side, right? You think of how big Fremont's attendance area is, where Monte Vista, Lynbrook, Cupertino, Homestead, and Fremont, there was just one school. So a huge, wide swath of land. So just to call this a Fremont story, I didn't think would necessarily be accurate because it really is the story of the West Side. And so what I really like too is just the way the community really wanted to be a big boy community, because Mountain View, Santa Clara, San Jose, and Palo Alto all were kind of ahead of the game on Sunnyvale and Cupertino, and it's hard to separate the two, especially during this era, Sunnyvale and Cupertino, because they were kind of one and the same at that point. And it was both sides of the West Side that came together and said, we really want to have a high school for our teenagers. And before Fremont was open, students went mostly to Santa Clara and Mountain View and Palo Alto High School. In fact, if you read the book, there's a lot of local politics that might bore people to death. But the big thing that happened was the Palo Alto School District said, we don't want your kids anymore. They were only getting a small amount of money for transportation to get the kids from Cupertino and Sunnyvale up to Palo Alto. And they said, we're losing money on these kids. You guys need to go find your own area. And so that sort of set this community on about a 3 or 4 year journey of, are we going to attach to Mountain View, to Santa Clara, to Campbell? Where are we going to go? Because everybody wanted this tax base, because there was, I mean, still to this day, right? A lot of tax base in these two communities. And eventually they just said, you know what? We want our own school. And so it was determined that way they would start it, and in that May of 1923, they had their own community. The other sort of piece to that question, the community, a couple of things historically, which makes it more of a community than just a Fremont High School story. I think comes from the World War II era, and that was actually some of my favorite parts to write was during World War II. This community was like every other community in the country, small town America, where my mom grew up in a town like that in Arkansas, Rogers, where the whole community got behind the war effort. And it was really to do the research and see what the adults did, what the kids did. As all the boys went off the war, all the boys just left school early. It was really the female students that took charge of what was going on at Fremont. They were running, job services. They were raising money, paper drives, they were doing everything, and a lot of leadership. So that was a really interesting piece to see the way, again, a local history, the community. And then also something that I do a whole chapter which was a very fascinating chapter. It was just a bigger story, but I tried to just relate it to Fremont and this community, was the Japanese internment. There was, I think it was about 60 students combined from Fremont and also Sunnyvale and Cupertino Elementary that ended up leaving the school. And it was really fascinating to see the way that the local press really kind of, not surprisingly, really ignored a lot of that. I mean, the little blurbs that talked about the students being removed from their communities and really not asking a lot of questions about how or why was this fair or not, was this right, was this an American thing to do? And that was, again, a community thing that connected it. And I think the last thing I really want to emphasize too, one of the longest chapters and one of my favorites to write was the 1950s and a local history. You see Sunnyvale opens in 1956, Cupertino in the fall 1958. The Cupertino and elementary school districts are just exploding. They're basically building 2 to 3 schools every year. This community also gets a hospital up at El Camino. This community gets Highway 280 comes into play. There was a talk of building an amusement park right there at Fremont and Wolf, which was, what was it called? That's in Detroit. What's the one? Yeah, Butcher's Corner. But what was the amusement park out near Hayes Mansion out there? Frontier Village. Yeah, Frontier Village. Yeah, that what eventually became Frontier Village, that they were looking at that piece of land, which is pretty cool. So you just, and then obviously in 1956, the company and why all of us are sitting here, and I think when I was growing up, everybody's dads worked there, was Lockheed came in 1956. So that was something that affected this entire community. Anyone here work at Lockheed? Anyone have a parent that worked at Lockheed? Yeah, it was seemingly everybody's parents. My dad worked at IBM, not Lockheed. 40 years. There you go. Excellent. All right, so that's a little bit why I called it a local history.
So you started about 10 years ago, 400 plus pages in the book. Where do you start?
That was actually the first full piece I wrote was the long piece on Sunnyvale High School closing. So that was something that was always intriguing to any of us who grew up during this era, any of us that grew up in the 80s or 90s and saw how the school and the district and everyone was affected by that, not just by Sunnyvale closing, but also so many of our teachers and young teachers getting laid off in the school district. So that was really a fascinating time to me. And you hear all these things that, oh, they closed the school and then got rid of the buses, they did this, they did that. And I really wanted to understand what happened. Why did the school district do it? What were they dealing with? What were they grappling with as an organization? And so that was really the first piece, which is odd since that was the middle of the school's history. But that was the first piece I went and completed. And then I went all the way back to those first couple chapters talking about how the school was formed. In fact, funny story about that. I finished those. I think that was the second piece that I wrote was the school opening. And then about probably fall of 23, maybe the San Jose Mercury News, someone donated a bunch of money and they digitized a bunch of the old San Jose Mercury News. And a lot of the research I did was the Sunnyvale papers, which stopped for like 3 or 4 years in the 20s. So I had a huge gap in the history of the school. All of a sudden these things pop up in the Mercury. I'm like, easily searchable, so I can do Fremont, Westside High School, Sunnyvale, Cupertino, and I could find and I just pieced together all these things. So I did a lot of rewriting. So if you see chapter, I think it's 2 and 3, are a little disjointed because I did a lot of sort of last minute editing because of finding that stuff. And then the rest of the pieces, just in terms of, I'm a sports guy, so those are really easy and fun to write. The ones that dealt with athletics. And then I guess I can talk a little bit about the format, which I think you gave me the idea for. And so eventually I was talking to Wes, how the heck do I put this all together? It's 100 years. And I had read a book called Cool Gray City of Love about San Francisco, which is 49 square miles. So the author did 49 stories about 49 different parts of San Francisco. Amazing book, Gary Kamiya, amazing book, a great writer. And so Wes said, what if you do 100 stories, 100 years? I'm like, ooh, that's good. Now I got to think of 100 things to write about. So that was a challenge, and I had a little Excel spreadsheet where I just started throwing stuff up there. There were some naturals just in terms of the format. I wanted big pieces. I stole from Wes, big pieces on the decades, big overviews. Then I wanted to, focus on athletics, stuff that I'm really passionate about. And then it really was, some of the historical piece, Japanese internment. We've got Sunnyvale closing. Need something fun. So senior pranks, things like that that would break up some of the, the big history stuff.
Yeah, I suggested the 100. I remember Andy recommending a baseball book. It was like 50 Reasons to Love Baseball or something like that. Joe Posnanski. Posnanski. A fantastic book, and we're both big baseball fans. And so I think that was where I kind of got the idea from. It was his recommendation for me that I got to reflect back to him on that. But in thinking about the 100 things, I was trying to say, well, you could just have like an artifact and talk about that. You could have a list. You can just put all the homecoming queens, and that could be one. And to Andy's credit, he said, "Yeah, I'm going to keep going," and he kept finding so many other things to write about in a really comprehensive way. I was trying to hold him back because I think I knew what he was up against in trying to come up with 100 chapters to write the story. But
to kind of this, but. I mean, Wes's book is so much more fun because I'm an almanac guy. He's got a lot of awesome almanac type just lists in there, and that would have been nice. But I think this is my baseball card collecting background. I'm a completist. So, if you're going 1 through 792 of 1980 Topps, you need all 792 cards, right? But if I want a list of all student body presidents, I want the list of all student body presidents. If I'm going to include that, to have a couple missing here and there would have just, I probably would have just lost my mind. So I decided that if I can't complete these things, I'm just not going to do it. And Cupertino, obviously, a younger school. The records were a ton better. And so I think you had a better, easier time in terms of piecing some of those things together. Heck, even things like 15 years ago, the yearbooks didn't list out certain things. And I'm like, I can't do this. And so I was just like writing all the time.
I'm still looking for the sophomore class president from the class of 1992. So if anybody has that for me. So what are some of the kind of the associated challenges with the book? Maybe you could talk a little about your research process. Where do you look? How do you find? You talked a little bit about the digital.
Yeah.
Those are great, but there's.
Yeah, the research. Two things. So. The research was mostly okay. I'm a as an educator, we have some time. So there's times I would, during a February break, April break, just go down, sit at the Sunnyvale Library and just go through the microfilm. I had my handy iPad at the time, and then eventually they digitized those as well at the Sunnyvale Library. So I was able to do that a little bit. But for the most part, I would go through the microfilm. Thankfully, they only did like one article a week for the most part in the early part, so I was able to take pictures of anything. I was able to sort of really zero in on the Fremont or Sunnyvale stuff or anything really education that was sort of interesting. So that was one piece I did was the microfilm. Wes and I also. Our principal's former executive assistant, Sue Larson, who many of you know, who also was our communications director of the district. She led us to the old warehouse of the district, and her predecessor in the 50s and 60s had these huge scrapbooks. I don't even... They were probably about the size of that TV screen right there.
A little bigger.
Yeah, a little bigger, yes, exactly. And my poor wife and child, our house smelled like dust and like mold for like I don't know how long. But those were great. She cut these things out, so anything Fremont, Sunnyvale High, Cupertino High, the other schools open more so. So that was so easy. Great pictures, and she had a real eye for what was kind of interesting. She had a lot of the funny, wacky stories that would come in, so she included a lot of those. So through the 60s, those were great. And then I don't know what happened because by the 70s, she just put them in folders. And so I had all these loose articles trying to piece together. And at that time, too, the Sunnyvale Standard ceased to exist, and so the local papers were not the best. So it was a lot harder. The 70s were harder to, as the decade moved on, harder to find good stuff in. And then the 80s, it all really kind of fell apart other than kind of what I saw. And the Times Tribune, the Palo Alto paper, did an okay job. They covered a lot of sports, but they were less like Fremont specific and more like district stuff. Hey, they might go on strike because of this or that. And they were okay. And then by the time the 90s, late 90s rolled around, I was working in the school district, so I kind of knew where and what to look for. So those are kind of the big things. The other things I loved were the school papers. Those were a blast. Just to read those, especially if you read them from the 40s, 50s. Just the tone of them is hilarious. They go from literally what is it? The Andy Griffith Show, Mayberry, right? Just all these. There's no problem. It's the 1950s, but there's no problems in the world. We got, so-and-so was seen with so-and-so in downtown San Jose. Someone got a new car, and, we saw, someone's got a new haircut. I mean, it was so frivolous. And then the 60s, it starts to get a little bit more interesting. In the 70s, I know there's a lot of 70s grab, and then just the shit hits the fan in the 70s. I mean, just the sarcasm, the cynicism, there's a lot of apathy. Just a lot, you can just tell. I think the students were basically allowed to write what they wanted to write. I think in the 50s, I think it's part of the culture of the time, but also you can't write about what's actually going on. And it got a lot of really, the 70s, and then the 80s, in the 80s, school paper was kind of similar, and in the 90s, I see a former member of the staff back there. Hello, Angeli. And Mark was on the staff as well, Montgomery. And it was a little bit more professional. We had an awesome journalism teacher, and the tone was a little bit more professional. And now the students are super serious. It's the complete opposite. It's more world and local affair or state affairs than what's going on in the school. So the school papers are great. I interviewed and talked to a lot of people. Got some great information from people. The hard problem with people is as Wes can attest. A lot of times memories don't quite line up to actually what happened. My dad who's sitting right here, and my wife and my child are all blessed, and Wes right here, all blessed with these great memories. And I always expect everybody to have that same type of memory detail, and they don't. So that was tough. And when I found those people, I was like, this person's gold, So just ask them lots of great questions, and they have lots of good details back there. My friend Angeli back there always makes fun of me if she has a question about anything that happened in 1989 or 90. I'm her person to go to. So, but that was interviewing people, and then the writing process I think there's a couple things I was really worried about. The Sunnyvale High School closing and also the Indian to Firebird. Those are two very hot topics. You go on any sort of social media thing and, Fremont related, and there's something about the Indian and the Firebird and this or that. And then there's a Sunnyvale. So I really wanted to try to treat those with as much, I wouldn't say neutrality, but kind of treating it like a historian. What were people saying? What did the process look like? What was the local press reporting? I tried my best not to have my opinion. I think I had a lot more of my opinion in the Sunnyvale piece than the Indian to Firebird piece. But I would try to be as sensitive as I can to that. Other thing too was, how do I include things that weren't great? I try to be as honest as possible about, I know in the 1980, there was a big drug bust at the school in 1984. It was on the front cover of the Times Tribune. Do I include that? Yeah, why not? So I included that. There was two big tragic deaths of students, one in 1972 down in Baja, and then another one right on Sunnyvale-Saratoga Road. I think it was 1946, right after play practice. 3 kids who were about to graduate from high school crashed their car right on Sunnyvale-Saratoga Road. I read that, and you read that there's three funerals in one day. So it was really hard to, how do I write in detail? So I mentioned those things. I tried not to dwell too much of them because I didn't feel like I was the right person to really talk about that. So, but yeah, and then I just started writing. Thankfully, Wes helped me. Angeli really helped me with the writing process as well. I didn't want to, it's a lot of words. And that's why I tell everybody, don't read it beginning to end. You'll be bored to death. Jump in. And this or that. Yeah, and it was a blast to do that and to write 400 pages. The last 30 are the grad years, so I don't really count those.
And very small fonts.
Yeah, very small. Thanks to Wesley Marsh right there.
You write a lot about the decades, and you kind of mark the decades as kind of unique kind of markers. But I wonder if you could maybe share your thoughts on some of the more broader eras of Fremont and what they mean to each other.
Yes. Going through it, I saw there are 3 very specific time periods. I start with 1923 up until I'd say about I'd say right after the war, maybe 46, 47, school was really trying to figure out what it wanted to be and who it wanted to be. And the community was, you can just already tell it was growing, and this was a nice place to live. It was a beautiful place to live. And so you could just see that each year the population of the school would go up. The population of Sunnyvale, population of Cupertino would all grow up. So it was just, and it was still a super agricultural community. Not all the kids in the school actually went to high school. That was something that shocked me when they opened the school. They said, oh, we'll have capacity for 300, there's 300 high school age kids, but only 215 will go to high school. So whatever, it doesn't matter. So that, things like that, where the, education was really not hugely valued, obviously, like it is now. And just reading through all the, I think in the decades pieces, I tried to pull out what they were teaching. I mean, it was fascinating what you could graduate from these schools up until the 70s, really, without specific classes. So up until after the war, it was a lot of agriculture-based class, a lot of shop classes, a lot of there was a 4-year typing course. Think about that. Took typing 1, typing 2, typing 3, typing 4. I have no idea what happened in typing in 3 or typing 4, but that was fascinating. I'm like, oh, who would have? Just think about the teacher that would have taught that, right? I'm doing this. Your head probably just would have exploded at that point. Shorthand and stenography and all those things that are so obsolete. And essentially what they were doing, what were they doing? They were training women, girls, how to work in offices, right? And so, and then a lot of the boys went into shop classes. And the shop classes were fascinating because they were teaching kids how to do stuff, with their hands. And they had, whether it was in the, making stuff, repairing stuff, it was fascinating to see that. And then there was, there was a college prep line as well during that time as well. The war hits, obviously, and we all know what happens here, right? This whole community it starts to boom. And actually, I should say this too. In the 1920s up until the 40s, this was a pretty diverse school. It was, I think all of you who grew up here, obviously we have our big Croatian population over here, our Zankiches and Martisiches and all that whole clan. We had a huge Japanese American population. The Hashimotos are part of that group. There's Spanish, Mexican, obviously Italian. So you had a really interesting influx of families that were here. A lot of sons and daughters of immigrants, much like today. And then the 40s and 50s kind of hit. People are moving here in droves. The first big subdivisions start to open. And all of a sudden, there's a need for more elementary schools. It went from the McKinley School to then Bishop opened, and Ellis and Cherry Chase, and then Cupertino School and San Antonio, and who else? I'm thinking, what were some of the early Cupertino schools? Lincoln, yeah, all of those, yeah, they all start opening up. So it starts to grow, and obviously, and I'm really proud of the work I did about just talking about immigration. And immigration from overseas really just stopped for a number of reasons, U.S. immigration law primarily, and so this community becomes very, very white. And people, I always call it more internal immigration. My mother, who came from Arkansas, my father, who came from Michigan. And so you had more of this internal immigration that was coming to California, the Bay Area. And they were all, you needed engineers here. This became, HP was here, Lockheed was here. And this really became a hub for young engineers that wanted to start families. Cheap houses, cheap land, amazing climate. You have these schools that are really becoming, really solid schools. And that was an interesting era. And I think, in the 60s, I say, was this peak Fremont, the 1960s? And it really, in many ways it was, just because of the way that the community was so involved in the school, and the way that the papers covered this. There was like 4 or 5 different papers that were covering Fremont High School. I mean, it was, speech and debate tournaments were, covered like the World Series. I mean, it was really super. The attention was really box scores for baseball, basketball, football games, and things like that. So that kind of goes on. Schools are, we go from 1 high school to 2 to 3 to 6. The district says, hey, we might need 10 high schools. We might have 8 million zillion students. We're going to grow forever. And then 5 years later, wait a second, we're not going to grow forever. And the late 70s hit, and it was not a great time. I know there's some educators in this room during that time. It was not fun. People were getting laid off. People's livelihoods were taken away. We lose a high school in North Sunnyvale, really affecting the most socioeconomically and diverse school in the school district. And so that really kind of halted that time period, that sort of 46 to 81. And then the last era is the 82 to today, right? I mean, we are a super diverse school. We've been a Latino plurality since, I think, about 1996 or 97, and during that time. And Fremont really became the Fremont that most of us know that went through there in the 90s and have gone there since. No, this super diverse place that covers, gosh, from Homestead Road all the way out to the San Francisco Bay and everywhere in between. So it's those three sort of chunks are the ones that I really kind of identified as the three eras of the Big F.
One of the great kind of thrills for me with you doing this book was the occasional either text or phone call or email. You're not going to believe this kind of email. What are some of your favorite moments of discovery that maybe you wish you hadn't found?
For your reunion, I got a huge packet of the Chiefs from the 80s, and there was, again, the scandalous things. Like I said, I don't know who was in charge in the 70s and 80s. Whoever was doing the newspaper advising in the early 80s, I mean, there was some really, really awful things that were pictures, really, and references. But aside from the really awful stuff, I think my favorite chapter, one of my favorite chapters was just the senior prank one. I would text Wes and go, oh my gosh, could you believe what these idiots did? And they did it all within like a 3-year span. My favorite thing, three favorite things they did. Number one, they took anyone go to Nimitz in here? Yeah, they took the Nimitz anchor, which as you know is on the other side of Fremont Avenue, dragged it all the way across. I think it's the class of 79 was involved in that. There you go. I'm going to keep an eye on you. And they dragged it all the way across and put it in the Fremont, I believe in the Rally Court. So they did that. Another thing they did, I think, is also the class of 79. They took one of the dragon heads from Golfland. If you grew up in Sunnyvale, we know the dragon heads. And they put it up on the Fremont Avenue side of campus in one of the trees. There's a great picture of it. I still don't know what they did or how they did it, but they did that. And I don't know if it was 78 or 79 where the kids, someone wrote a letter and sent it to every house in the school that said, instead of school starting at 8 a.m., there's going to be some sort of in-service so school doesn't start until 10:30. So they sent that out, and one of the grads sent me the actual letter. She had it. And so, yeah, so the phone was ringing off the hook. Like, I don't know, 700 kids were late to school. And the assistant principal at the time estimated these kids, and this was like 78 or 79, cost them like $300 to print it out, to do the stamps. And so those were some of my, and any class of 81-ish, 82-ish in here? Okay, so tell me about the Jack Daniels sign. Oh, yeah, okay, 81. Well, there's 81 or 82. There was a Jack Daniels billboard someplace in town. Yeah, and they took it off the billboard, and then they somehow attached it. You guys know where the small gym is, which is huge blank wall. They attached it to the side of the small gym, taken down. Somehow it ended up the next year, posted up again on the small gym, and they had a great tagline. It said, underneath it, what do you think it said? Jack is back, which was, I thought, so I love that stuff. All the great Fremont senior pranks, although there's still, and Wes, this is not a Fremont senior prank, but still the MVP senior prank of all time in the Fremont United School District. Any Monte Vista grads in here? In the early 70s, I know one back there. In the early 70s, the Monte Vista kids, they put an ad in the local paper, and it was like Monte Vista motor sales. And so they had a listing of all these cars. It'd be like 1974 Nissan Sentra or whatever. Name, Wes Morse, and a phone number. And so basically what they did, they put all their teachers' cars in the thing and their phone numbers and had it in the newspaper. So in terms of quantity, the Fremont kids, I think, are number one. the number one quality one has to be the MV Matadors. But that was a pretty fun thing that I found. That I love those pranks. I'm trying to think of some of the other some of the things I just...
Well, we went back and forth with the band names.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
The evolution of band names.
Yes. And this is a total inside thing.
Before the DJs took over everything.
If you ever seen the show Freaks and Geeks, what's the name? Was it Creation? What's the name of the band?
Yeah, Creation.
Creation. So we bonded over that show Freaks and Geeks, which was on in the early 2000s, and it was set in the early 80s in suburban Detroit. And this kid was in a band. He wanted to join this band called Creation. And so at some point, Wes was going through all the Cupertino stuff. He's like, all these 70s dance bands have these idiotic names that are all sort of one. They were wild. And so I went through all the Sunnyvale and Fremont yearbooks and found all the band names. There's a whole chapter devoted to band names. And then Wes sort of cross-referenced, like, oh, this band was at all 3 schools in 1 year. So we found highly were amused with all of those. Some other just fun stuff. The science pond at Fremont, there was an alligator in the science pond, which went missing at some point, which I thought was fantastic. A true story. There was an alligator in the science pond, and it went missing. Iwo was kidnapped at some point in the class of '84. The Iwo statue disappeared. They screwed around with that. There was a slot machine that was going on across the street on Sunnyvale, Saratoga Road. Teaching-wise, in my It'll Never Happen Again chapter, there was a time where they were paying parents to grade essays, which was,
Great idea.
Yeah, great idea. And, it backfired on the kids. The kids were excited about it, but you know what any English educators probably understand. What do you think happened? If you were able to not correct essays, would you assign more essays or less essays? You're doing more. So the kids got pissed. It's like, oh my gosh, we got more essays now that, Miss Worsbowski's not grading these things anymore. So that was amusing that would happen. The various incarnations of tradition called Slave Day, which was very problematic at the time. Kids were outraged that happened. The smoking section, obviously, was who lived during the smoking section era. I used to think that why in the world did they have a smoking section until I became a school administrator. For the last 5 or 6 years, we've been chasing kids in the bathroom vaping. I'm like, oh, I get it. They just gave up. You can smoke, but do it over here. We're sick and tired of chasing you idiots. So that was a pretty fun thing to read through some of the rules and regulations. And the other thing, too, just to go back to the educational standards, it was shocking. Everyone, the continuous theme of education was always somehow better way back when. But in the 50s and 60s, you can graduate high school without taking algebra. You can graduate from high school without teaching science. You can graduate from high school, the standards and the graduation requirements were very loosey-goosey. And so for anybody to say, oh, it was better then, not really.
Four years of PE, though.
Yeah, 4 years of PE. Gosh darn it, right?
4 years of PE.
Darn right they were running the mile every week.
Yes,
yes, exactly. So can't miss that on the swim unit.
So, and as you're researching, as you're writing, who are some of the heroes of your book?
I mean, first and foremost, you got to the teachers. I think, and that was one of the really difficult things about the book was like, how do I include all these? I mean, everyone in this room had a favorite teacher. Some of us all had the same favorite teacher, but to be able to honor those educators who gave 35, 40 years, not just to Fremont, but maybe to Sunnyvale, and they came over to Fremont, and just larger than life people. And I read someplace, and I'm stealing this from someone, but you really, when you as a parent now, think about think about that. I think as an educator, think about the responsibility. You're sending your kid to these classrooms, and they're changing 6 or 7 times a day with these adults that, in theory, are preparing your kids for whether it be going to college or community college or military or work or whatever it may be. Guide them to make good decisions. Come to them when they're having problems, and you're like, that's a big responsibility. And for all the educators in the room that have done that and have done it for a long time, they are the heroes. And just the names that came up, and I think really the ones that came up a lot are the ones that really were attached to, whether it's clubs or athletics. You throw the coaches, Ken Stanger, Jerry Ferguson, Phil Kelly, my football coach, Brad Matheny, John Dunning with the volleyball, Weber Lawson, now our coaches now, Eric Deuce, Jason Townsend, people that just put in, Richard Steffen, putting all the time into teaching kids, and some of the just the people that built the culture, I think, of the district as well. I think, Mr. Lawson in the back knows A.C. Stevens, famously quoted by Dale DeSalm saying that man did not meet a committee. He was the first one that was really the true lone superintendent. He was principal and then became the superintendent. He's the one that built this school district to what it was, started a lot of what we do, whether it's athletics or performing arts or this or that. So he was a really a big hero. Some of the counselors, Hank Norberger, I think a lot of you know about. Some of the, our counseling team today, Dan Amosquita, Anna Franco, Sandy Woolsey. We have all these amazing people who are supporting kids every single day. The performing arts and the activities people, you throw in Carmendale Fernandez, larger than life figure. Everybody knows Carmendale. You go, the band directors. I mean, someone who I knew very well, Tim Shannon. These people that they spend more than just teaching your kid history. They're in there after school, creating opportunities for your kids to not only connect with something different than the curriculum, but also, I always say, sometimes you just join a club, it's 10% doing stuff, the other 90% just screwing around and having fun with your friends, right? And to have adults to spend that time and do that, those were the big heroes, were to me the educators. And then you also, on the classified staff, the bus drivers, the cafeteria staff, the student conduct liaisons, the para-educators, the office staff, just amazing people that truly have impacted all of us in one way or the other. And I just think of, the front desk person, the person you walk into Fremont High School, first person you see, sometimes that's how you're going to judge what the school is about. You drive by Fremont Avenue. What does that school look like? That's the custodial crew, right? If it looks great, God, that's a great school. Well, yeah, because these guys work their ass off to make the school look nice. So there's a lot that going on in how people view a school, even just from we're driving by and, hey, that place looks great.
What didn't kind of get in? Like, what were some things that maybe you couldn't quite sneak in somehow?
I think the toughest thing just was the teachers. I think you see I did something on Carmendale, did something on Hank Norberg, but there was really hard. I mean, Tim Shannon could have had his own chapter, or Mr. Senna could have had his own chapter, or there's some of the band directors from the 60s and 70s. They could have had Marlene Rosberg could have had her own chapter. You have all these really super dynamic people, and I just couldn't do these little biographies all the way through. So my strategy was just kind of weave them in the story. Shannon appears in 3 or 4 different chapters. Mr. Senna, one of my friend's dads, who was an assistant principal at our school, I put him in the Sunnyvale chapter and the Fremont chapter and all these different things. So it really was hard doing that. The other hard part was just including the voices of people. I did reach out to people, and you'll see some of those chapters, the voices of, and so people were so generous with their time, and they all had different tones and different angles that they took with the voices of chapters. I actually stole that. My father-in-law went to St. Ignatius, and they had a big history book for their 150th anniversary, and he had a lot more of those, but they were shorter, and so I wanted something that was longer and more in depth. So I really relied on Rosina Lozano and Ali Mangan, Bill Freeman, and Ron Houseman. Different people do those longer pieces. So it was really harder. I wanted more of the student voice and people's reflections, and I don't think I had enough of that in there. I know Susan Wright here from the Alumni Association. She does a lot of these amazing stories about people and items and different parts about the school, and that's her superpower. Her writing is much more attuned to that, so I tried that style. I'm more of a history kind of guy, so that's kind of why mine is like that, and I think having the voices people helped out. So those were kind of the things that I left out, and I looked on, and again, athletics things. There was other teams and people and athletes I wanted to, but I mean, there was already so much sports stuff in there. I had to leave something out. And then lastly, the one piece I really wanted to do, there just wasn't enough oomph to it, but I tried to include it in each of the chapters, was just pre-Title IX female athletics. The 30s and 40s and 50s, they kind of mentioned them in the papers. great pictures in the yearbooks of the Girls Athletic Association, but I just did not have enough oomph to do it. And most of those people that were at Fremont in the 30s and 40s participating in those activities are not with us anymore. So that was really, I really wanted to do a longer piece about that, but I just did not have, I couldn't make it work. So I try to weave it in. If you'll see at the end of each chapter, I do what happened in sports during the time, and then I always try to include sort of those pre-Title IX female athletics. What's going on there?
So you're putting in 10 years, it's 400 plus, there's quite a few photos in there, which are a lot of fun. You put your heart and your soul into this, that's very, very evident. What was it like for you kind of having it out? What's that experience of, here it is public, take a look, what's been some of the feedback? Or
It's been a lot of fun. I think I was worried about people nitpicking this, nitpicking that. People maybe they're not reading it when they buy it, but I've not had any, knock on wood, any super negative feedback. I had one person ask one question why this wasn't included, and I said, well, I just didn't have it, that piece of information. So people have been really nice. And again, I think I had a great conversation with Wes when I would get in my really, just worried about, gosh, people are going to be upset about this, or I didn't leave this in. He's like, Andy, remember, people are experts on their 4 years, right? Their 4 years at Fremont, their 4 years of high school. They remember this event, this person, that person, but you're writing 100 years. So it really, in terms of, that really gave me a little bit of relief in terms of, I know I can't include everything, and so that was helpful. So just having people come to my office. The Class 84 came in the other day. I gave them a tour. They were a hoot and a half. So talking to them was a lot of fun. Talking to my former classmates that have emailed or called, parents of my classmates that have emailed and called. I had one parent of one of my elementary school classmates like, I didn't know what you would look like, but I just knew you would be tall when you would come and meet me in the office. So that was great. So connecting to some of those people, it's been a lot of fun talking to everybody, and people come back. Hey, I've had a lot of repeat business. People are coming back. I always laugh. I've got 3 families vying for most books bought. Rich Steffen, you guys probably know Rich Steffen, one of the nicest human beings on the planet, greatest math teacher of all time. He still volunteers at Fremont, so he's been coming in buying books for all sorts of retired teachers. Hey, Laurie Turner wants this. Cheryl Vettel wants this. Dick Hanavesi wants this. And so that's been fun to give books to Rich. And, he's got like 4 or 5 one-liners that just have me cackling whenever he walks into my office. So it's been, and I think I've had from the 50s all the way up until one of our juniors. So I've got every decade. The 70s are definitely in the lead, which makes sense. The school is at its largest. So I think 70s grads have bought the most. 90s are right behind. People know me, so they've been very kind and generous in that regard. So, and then I've shipped them all over the country. I think to 12 or 13 states. Washington State being the biggest. And I've had one city in Texas where 2 Fremont grads happen to live. They're like 20 years apart in age. And then 2 people in Vancouver, Washington, also Fremont grads that are like 15, 20 years apart. So it's kind of fun to see those. So I got New Jersey, Colorado, all up and down California. So being able to ship the books. I know the guy at the post office, I think he gets annoyed every time I come in. He says, you can do this online. I'm like, yeah, but I like the kind of, the personal touch. He just looks at me and rolls his eyes. So I always hope he's not there because it's awkward. But yeah, it's been great. So yeah.
Well, we're coming up on an hour. Maybe
yes,
one more.
We are.
I have one more question for you. And then,
yes, sir.
And maybe a little Q&A. I think you said.
If anyone wants to Q&A, they can Q&A.
But tell us about the next 100 years of Fremont High School. How do you think it's going to go?
Well,
and who's going to write that book?
I'll say 20 to 30. The last chapter, I really try to think about this. And what I really want people to get out of the book, obviously, is it's a great community. Those of us that grew up here, we're super fortunate. Whether you went to Fremont or went to Homestead, this is an awesome place to grow up in Sunnyvale. And we were all very spoiled. We had awesome parents. We had, Little League coaches like Ray Johnson right there. We had awesome teachers, whether it was Dick Hanavesi or Doug Boyd or Cheryl Stewart or, whoever it may have been in our years growing up. It was a great place to grow up. So I want people really to think about their experience growing up in this community. And then just moving forward, and the other thing, this place is always changing, you know. It didn't look like it did in the 20s or the 50s or the 60s or the 80s or the 90s. I mean, you just think of, you know, that when I taught at Fremont in the 00s, I mean, our immigrant population were coming from China. They were coming from Mexico. And that was mostly it. And lots of, you know, sort of, you know, legacy Filipino students or Vietnamese students. And then and that was in the 00s. And then 20 years later, we have huge student population from Israel, from Central America, from South Asia. So just in 20 years, you see the way that the school changes. And so I really want people to recognize that. It's never better or worse. It's just different. Kids still love basketball. They still love, you know, music. They still love, you know, freshmen still love chasing each other around campus for no reason and just pawing at each other. And Yukari will know this line. You have to tell them, keep your hands to yourself in play and in love, please, which was one of Cammie's favorite lines. So just those things, just, I mean, kids are kids. And Wes, you've taught them for you. No matter what their last names are, they're still freaking kids, right? So I want people to sort of recognize that. And just moving forward, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, we've got the declining enrollment district-wide. It's not yet hit us or Homestead, so we've been very fortunate on the 2 south of Stevens Creek schools. We've been pretty steady, but you can definitely see we graduated about 600 kids last year, down to 560 or so this year. Our 2 freshman, sophomore classes are just a nudge under 500. Homestead's seeing a little bit of a dip too. So we're kind of getting there, so it'll be interesting, but that creates opportunities. Whether it be, you know, smaller classes or, you know, we're not an ADA district, so we get less kids. We're not getting less money in terms of property taxes and things like that. So we might be, you know, might open up some creative opportunities, what type of classes we offer, what kind of opportunities that we have for kids. So those are kind of the things I keep thinking about. And I just hope that the schools, I don't think this place will ever not really emphasize education, just because this is who this place has been for so long. And so I think that will remain the same. What the kids look like, where they're from, what their interests might be, areas of study might be a little bit different. But I think that it's still going to be a place. You know, whose line? What was it? Ed's line about just, you know, when people retire. No, it was a Dooley, but when you retire from teaching. Oh, it's Harry. Okay.
Harry Betancourt.
Yeah.
So yeah, the school will kind of forget you after 2 weeks, and the school moves forward without you.
Yeah, so
which is kind of depressing.
Yeah, it's kind of depressing, but
as an educator.
But the point I'm trying to make is that
it's true.
Yeah, kids move on, adults move on, but when you have the culture and history that Fremont does, and the way this community supports it, you know, it's going to continue to evolve, but it's still going to be this. In the book, you know, I was just saying, it's just this community's most important institution, and it always will be, just because of where it is and what it means. So, thank you guys. I don't know if we want to do. I mean, we've already been. I said 90 minutes or 60 minutes. It's been 65 minutes. So, if anyone has any questions, they can certainly ask a question.
No, I'm not going to take the hook from Andy. I just wanted to let you know, in 2 weeks we're going to have Karen Hansen here and Robert Honda. And they're going to be speaking on Sunnyvale High School. So hopefully we'll have more chairs, and it's a standing room only. So I think that says a lot. So I definitely want to thank you all for coming. Definitely we'll continue with Q&A. If you feel like you need to leave, of course you're welcome to go. But I will hand this right back to you so you can keep going.
Yeah, I'll just take a couple questions. Yes, sir. Go ahead, Wes.
You mentioned A.C. Stevens, but do you know what year did the district kind of get created, and do you talk a little bit about some of the district people in the book?
Yeah, district created in 1921, and then school opened in 1923. So yeah, the book really talks about how it forms, the original school board, original teaching staff, all of that. Yeah, we go right back to that. So
I graduated in the late 70s
Yes.
from Fremont High School. I actually didn't have a great time there, but they had a situation called A-Day, B-Day. So I came from a very low-income family, so I was able to get out of school at noon so that I could go to work from 1 to 9, and ended up graduating in 3 years. And it actually paid off in the end because I ended up becoming an executive at Apple, where I was for 36 years.
Very cool.
So it turned out to be better in the end than it was going through. So I was happy I went.
Yeah, Fremont definitely on the cutting edge with schedules. I mean, the block schedule at Fremont started in the 60s. They went away from it and went back to it in the 90s. And now all 5 schools use that schedule. Yes. Hello, Susan.
Andy, I meant to ask you the other day this question. At the end of the book is all the grads, and I know you had asked, we worked about commencement programs, but who actually typed up all those names that go in there? Because that's an awful lot of names.
You're looking at them.
You did.
And then Wes put them organized them into the book. So
I wondered how you got those all in there.
There was something called the pandemic. School administrators were at school every single day. All right, I got a 1958 grad program. When you have no students on campus, there's not a lot for the school administrators to do. Yes, sir.
Mike Malone, 71. Have a question. Can you name some notable, I mean, we know most of the notable alumni, you know, Carl Eckern and Francie LaRue and Peter Uberoth and all that. I think there's a Nobel Prize winner in there, too.
Andrew Fire, yes.
Yes. Any other notable alumni we may not know about?
Yes. There's a whole section on the Olympians. There's a lot of, in fact, doing this research, I found Olympian. I had no idea. There's a student class of 73, Jenny Bartz, who competed in the Munich Olympics as a high school junior. Which not even acknowledged in the 1973 yearbook, which is just shocking. Here's this young woman who finished fourth in 2 different events. So a lot of Olympians. There's 2 Academy Award nominated screenwriters. Bruce Evans, who was nominated for one of the all-time greatest movies, Stand By Me, adapted the Stephen King novel. My child knows this other one because every time Harry Potter comes up, his name Steve Kloves. I think it's called Kloves. He's a late 70s grad. He did the screenplays for all the Harry Potter movies. He also got nominated for The Wonder Boys. And then he also wrote and directed a super underrated movie. I think it was from '89, The Fabulous Baker Boys with Michelle Pfeiffer and the Bridges brothers. A lot of actors too, just random people. Well, obviously Terry Hatcher, we all know. This guy named Terry Haney, who came to Fremont like as a senior. His IMDb is lengthy. He's been in a ton of different things. Bobby, your classmate. No, who's an actor in every TV commercial known to man. David Douglas, yes, from the class of '95 at the Walzak household. Hey, there's David Douglas again. He's in every commercial ever made. He's in a lot of TV stuff from Bobby's class '95. What's that? I don't know who Daniel Reardon is. There you go. We'll talk after. So yeah, Andrew Fire, Nobel Prize winner. So yeah, there's a lengthy group of folks. Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Peter Uberoth, yeah. Save the Olympic Games. Any other questions?
Caller.
Yeah. All right. So I'm looking at the people in this room. I think most of you already have books, so thank you very much. I did bring the rest I have, so if you do want, I have instructions, cash, 30 or Venmo. That's one thing I learned how to do over this whole project was how to do Venmo. So if you want to come up here, purchase a book, that would be fantastic. So thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thanks, everybody.